Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the All Saints podcasts. By popular demand, we have, don't laugh, okay. By popular demand, I have back with me this week Pastor Geoff Shaw. He was with me a couple of weeks ago and lots of people thought it was very good, including myself, and I enjoyed it much more than just talking to a camera on my desk. So Geoff, great to have you back with us. Welcome.
Good to be back again.
Today I want to talk about and hear you talk about masculinity, which is a topic which we've touched on here and there and has been fairly prominent in Christian media and so on and so forth over the last few years. And I was prompted to this by one pastoral interaction, which we'll come to in a couple of minutes, but also by an email I received from our friends at Theopolis. And between them, these two cameos really, I thought they gave a great pair of alternative, complementary biblical perspectives on masculinity, and just helpful to expand our biblical thinking about this subject rather than just having it shaped by sort of baptized pagan notions of chest thumping and so on and so forth. So I'm going to read an extract from this email from Theopolis and then get Pastor Shaw to comment on it. Does that sound okay?
That sounds all right.
All right, so
we'll go with that.
So I don't know whether you're signed up to Theopolis, everybody, but this is the In Medias Res official newsletter of Theopolis Institute, and they send it out every week or so. And here's what it says. Any way you cut it, the US is in for a year and a half of political tumult. Start simple. The two most likely presidential candidates would be the oldest two candidates ever. Wrinkle one candidate is a former president running against an incumbent. That hasn't happened in a century or so. Wrinkle two, one of the candidates, former President Trump, faces multiple criminal indictments and vows to keep on running, even from jail. Wrinkle three, the other candidate has a few things going on in the background, obviously reputational and legal things. And then wrinkle four, the sitting president, President Biden, faces a challenge within his own party which may prove troublesome as Robert Kennedy Jr. gains steam. And then, this is the conclusion of the article, so this is Peter Lightheart. Psalm 2 is right. The nations rage like the sea. We don't need to worry about getting engulfed. We don't need to add to the panic. Our king reigns from Zion, and his throne isn't the least bit threatened. Therefore, neither are we. Resolute, non-anxious, courageous leaders and communities are in short supply. Strive to be among them, islands of calm in a gathering storm. Blessings, Peter Lightheart. Sorry, Peter, if we've just broken copyright by reading. And the title of the email subject is Don't Panic. And I just thought that's great because we have a king on Zion, the heavenly throne room hill, who is not panicking. The man on the throne is not panicking. How ridiculous if all his brothers, all the men of the church, were running around like headless chickens.
But don't you realize, Steve, that this is the most important election
since
that we
the last one? I mean,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, where have we heard that before?
Yeah, but it is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, because we catastrophize. We have such a short-term view of history, both looking backwards and looking forwards, that we think we see recent events and immediate future events much bigger because they are so close to us.
Right.
We forget the centuries of the martyrs in the early church, in the medieval period, in the Reformation period, in parts of the world now. We're narrowly focused in time, narrowly focused in space, and so we think there is reason to panic. And Jesus is like, What's the big deal, men?
Right.
Yeah?
Right. That said, I would say, obviously we long for the days where we had better choices, right? Where you want to vote for Kennedy or you want to vote for Nixon, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Almost any choice.
I mean, sorry to bring Nixon into it or whatever, but hey, I brought Kennedy into it.
And this was striking to me back in 2016. We were still in England then, and I remember asking Peter himself. He was visiting Emmanuel in London where I was then pastoring. I remember asking him, "What in the world is going on in the greatest democracy on the planet?
Yeah.
Are these the best that the two great parties can come up with? And the answer is yes.
Yes, right.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, apparently so. And we've heard it said many times in our church and around.
We get the leaders we deserve.
Yeah, we're under judgment. We're right,
Yeah.
and this is, we laugh about it, but it's obviously a very sad state of affairs.
So the solution is not panic.
No,
but the solution is not either. Doesn't matter.
No.
So I find this image of men leading their households as foot soldiers in the army of the king profoundly helpful, because what should the foot soldiers in the army of the king who has conquered and is conquering do? Well, we're prayerful, we're resolute, we're hopeful, we're expecting probably more of this kind of nonsense before we get less of it. We might be, the rest of our lives might be lived in this political atmosphere.
right.
But there is a way of being, what's the phrase that Peter uses, just quote it again, resolute, non-anxious, courageous. And I think that's the thing that really strikes me. So often we think of courage, and in the context of masculinity, as a kind of hyper-activist mentality, that resolute, non-anxious.
Right. We do not have to panic.
Yes.
And we do not have a choice between acquiescing to all the silliness around us, as one president does, or being a buffoon and having no control over his
no self-discipline,
and threatened, frankly, by by everyone. So we don't have to choose between those two things, because we have a different identity.
Yes.
And our identity is not in ourselves.
Right.
It's in the one who's sitting on the throne. Right.
And I think this is where it's so helpful to think about this from an ecclesial perspective, so that where can we focus our energies? It is in the body of the one who is on the throne. So what we are as members of the church is members of Christ.
Yes.
And from a social perspective, we're an outpost of a new community. So it's not like, we're really hoping that someday in the future there'll be a place where wisdom and righteousness could reign. We are in a place where wisdom and righteousness reigns. If we don't make it happen here, this is on us, not on Wall Street or K Street or the White House or the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. We at All Saints, and whatever church we're in, are an outpost of the kingdom of this King. And in our homes, in our families, in our personal lives, in our relationships with each other, in our community as a church, we get to shape the culture there, and we're promised that culture will grow over time to fill the earth.
Right.
So really, it's not just that we should avoid either hyperactivism or passivity. We have a very well-defined sphere of purposeful, resolute, courageous action within the church, within our own lives, within our families. And it's there that we can focus all that disciplined, masculine courage and strength.
Right. And that kind of leadership and that kind of masculinity is going to be exercised in the most ordinary ways, isn't it? I mean, at home, right? I mean, that's just your daily routine we're talking about. In the workplace,
it's
you get up every day, you go to work, and you can rise and shape culture and be a leader in your workplace, and then in the church, really.
And it's teenagers growing up and being the most hardworking kid in your class,
absolutely, or
being the self-controlled young person on your running team or in your baseball team. Being the one who doesn't swear and refuses to shake hands when he loses. It's these ways in which we manifest mature, confident, joyful optimism as members of the one who is conquering.
And one who's willing to proclaim the truth. In love.
Right. It was wonderful. Just this last week, I heard of a guy in the workplace from All Saints. I won't tell you who it is, but he's been talking to a friend of his, and his friend wants to be a Christian because he's seen in Christian life and action the concrete manifestation. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but certainly this much is true. The concrete manifestation of something that works, something that's actually fruitful. So that your comment actually raises the other arena that I wanted to spend a minute or two on, the ordinariness of the home setting, and this is going to be particularly relevant to men who are married, but and any man who's not married is, or almost any man who's not married is potentially preparing for marriage. So I was talking to a gentleman about the implications of 1 Peter 3, and you realise that 1 Peter 3, 1-6 is a bunch of instructions to wives, and then there's a short instruction to husbands, and it is very well known in 1 Peter 3:7. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, literally live with your wives according to knowledge, katagnosin, showing honour to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. And that little phrase, showing honour to the woman as the weaker vessel, of course, is the bit that provokes raised eyebrows. In some contexts, it provokes stammering apologies for the misogynistic character of the Holy Scriptures. Right. Yawn. Actually, what it is the most obvious observation about the differences between men and women, and not just bench press capacity, but in what really struck me in this conversation. Tell me what you think of this. Is when men are being really godly men, and when women are being really godly women, women are more emotionally sensitive and almost thin-skinned in relation to other people's suffering. If you had, it's not that men can't be sensitive and so on and so forth, and there's obviously there's a spectrum, but it just struck me that there's lots of different angles to this, but one of the things that happens, if men who are husbands live with their wives in a way that shows great gentleness and great understanding, sensitivity to the particular emotional needs of their wives, that allows their wives to develop and express the peculiarly feminine emotional sensitivity that otherwise they would have to not develop because they'd get bruised, right? If you flip it around, imagine a husband who is boorish, insensitive, crass, never showed affection. The wife would either just implode, or she'd have to develop a thick skin emotionally and not be responsive to that emotional insensitivity, which would mean she's likely to be more thick-skinned in other relationships as well.
Right, and less feminine in that sense.
Precisely.
Right? We're talking about masculinity and femininity.
Right. So flip it around. What is it that would bring out of a man's wife that latent gentleness and femininity that is characteristic of femininity, the gentleness and sensitivity that we see in really godly women? It's if their husbands don't require them to toughen up to cope with the barrage of insensitivity that they get, but instead they're gentle with them. And I've just noticed over the years that many of the men who I've admired because of the strength of their leadership, a masculine quality, actually are remarkably gentle with their wives. And their wives are extremely sensitive and gracious. They're exactly the sort of person that I would encourage a lady who was grieving, say, to go and see, because they would have this deep emotional empathy and connection, because they've not been cauterized by emotional insensitivity on the part of their husbands.
Right.
So that in that sense then, okay, so this is coming a long way around. So how is this masculine? Well, a man who is willing to expend the emotional effort to show that grace and gentleness and sensitivity, like even when he's tired, even when he's been at work since when there are too few digits on the clock and he's just arrived home late and he just feels like, I need a beer, I need to go to bed or whatever. Although don't drink beer out of exhaustion, drink water, and then if you still need beer, have beer afterwards. But a man who, even at that time when he's exhausted, has the physical and emotional character to be gentle to his wife and be gracious and be accommodating emotionally.
Right.
Is being a real
which
man.
is really, yeah, exactly. I was just going to say it, which is true masculinity, right?
Right.
And this is where our culture gets it all wrong.
Yeah.
This is where the polar opposites of our political spectrum get it wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, one president probably would not even, he would take offense at this kind of language and say, well, what is a woman? Even, they're struggling with what is a woman. And the other represents kind of this boorish mentality towards women that you treat them as objects, and you're known as someone who really doesn't love women and doesn't treat them with respect. So
and it's a manifestation.
Christian men can be different.
Exactly. It's a manifestation of how busted our political system is. That there's any woman in the country who thinks that he's a better choice than the other guy. But both directions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like, why would a woman who's thinking right want to vote for a party that has been led by a man who says he has treated women in that way, or by a man who struggles to define what a woman is?
Right.
It's absolutely unreal.
Lost.
So the male figureheads that we're presented with are busted. What we have in Christ is the most gentle, gracious model of a man who, in relation to his bride, shows such unending patience. I mean, just think how patient he is with us. Like we were talking today about your. By the time this goes out, they'll have heard your sermon.
Okay.
So this is going to sound
mulling
strange.
it over.
You're mulling it over, but it's just really striking to me. One of the things that we talked about here, or I don't know whether it goes into your sermon, is the Lord hears such imperfect prayers. Jesus looks at our hearts, and in ourselves we're still corrupted, and yet he still listens to us, still loves us, still cares for us.
Yep.
And so we have there a model of that, and that's masculine strength to dig deep emotionally, to provide an emotional platform for our wives to thrive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Hey, listen, you're a busy man, and you've got lots of things to do. I got to tell you, the listeners, this. I was about to record this podcast on my own, talking to the camera, and I suddenly thought, why am I doing this? I'm going to go and get Pastor Shaw. So he's busily working downstairs. I went and interrupted him, so I'm going to let him go now. So I think we're done. So please go ahead and share this with your friends if you think they find it helpful. And as ever, if you have any questions, send them our way. For now, God bless, and we'll see you next time.